I am Dekvitam, an armored fighter in non-choreographed night fights like these. Based on my years of experience in duels with a wide variety of medieval weapons under the most realistic conditions possible without killing yourself, it is time to put together a list of the most effective and dangerous medieval weapons in armored combat, man against man. Imagine you are challenged to a duel in full late medieval knight armor, and you have the choice of your own weapon. You don't know which weapon your opponent will take, so you think, which weapon is the best for killing a full armored enemy without getting killed yourself? Which weapon will you choose? And what weapon did knights use for a duel to the death? The first weapon on our list is the one-handed mace. Yes, this list starts from the bottom, and the mace is the worst choice for a duel. So this is our number 10. Don't get me wrong, any weapon used in medieval battlefield could be deadly. Humans have always been talented when it comes to killing, and all the weapons listed here can claim to be effective in their designed way. But why does the mace only come at number 10 and would never be chosen by me for an armored duel to the death? Armor consists of perfectly tailored metal plates that overlap each other. A blow to one spot distributes the force of a blow over a large area, dampening the impact. In most cases, the geometry of armored parts ensures that a large part of the force is dissipated. Hardened steel usually doesn't dent, if it shows any damage at all. Of course, a mace is capable of knocking out an opponent. Powerful hits can blacken your vision for a few seconds or send you to the ground. But they don't kill you immediately. The tactic of defeating your opponent through concussions in a duel that ends in a few seconds is too long term. Since blows to the head are the biggest danger in fighting a mace, the target is easy to predict. In addition, you need the perfect distance. A mace is short and you have to get close to the opponent, but not too close, because a mace is not effective in close combat. You need space for a good swing to strike with force, and the hit zone is limited to a small area. I don't know if there are any historical sources for the use of maces in knightly duels on foot to a death, but maces can be used on the battlefield to capture knights, to knock them out, get them arrested, and get ransom for the knights. At number 9 for me is the morningstar or spiked mace. These spikes usually don't penetrate so deep that you can kill an opponent immediately. Although more weak points and gaps in armor are now a possible target than just the head with the mace, nevertheless, the attack repertoire is very limited and consists exclusively of heavy blows and less flexible stabs. A perfect distance is necessary to strike powerful blows, and in a fight you usually find yourself constantly retreat. This weapon is hardly recommended without a secondary weapon for close combat. In a duel where you want to kill your opponent as quickly as possible, it's not the best choice. In combat without armor, spears are considered the king of weapons, winning every duel. Long stabbing weapons are also threatening when fighting with armor. The narrower the point and higher the force, the easier it is to penetrate mail or step into the gaps of armor. Without the weapon cross on the poleaxe and halberds, more on that later, a step is also harder to block. In many duels you find spears as weapons that you use at the beginning. Throw at your opponent and then change the weapon, or only try 1 or 2 steps. And if you don't get a hit, the weapon changes to another weapon. Spears are powerful at long range, but almost useless in close combat. If an opponent manages to evade the first attack of a spear, or the second, there is a high probability that he will then be able to engage in close combat. Only in combinations with a close combat weapon is spear or Aalspieß can be a powerful weapon. The one-handed warhammer, pec de corbin or Krähenschnabel. Similar to the morningstar, they have a longer spike. However, the spike has to be wider to not break off, and therefore can rarely penetrate deep enough for a kill to the chest plate. Only strikes to the head can kill instantly. A heavy blow to the armor can dent it and cause it to break or penetrate a few centimeters. Due to the padding and the distance between the plate and the body, the damage caused by the spike hitting through is often low. Tearing at the armor pieces also has little effect in a duel with only one weapon. It can even be a disadvantage if you hack into the opponent's armor and get stuck. But of course, on the battlefield this looks different. The warhammer develops its deadly effects when the spike hits gaps or the mail. However, hitting the gaps is not that easy with strikes. Like the mace, the right distance has to be present. You can quickly find yourself on the defense and in a permanent retreat to keep the right distance. However, if this weapon hits, it will be brutal. A war axe has a heavy axe blade with a pointed tip towards the front that can also be used for stabbing. Against chainmail there is often a spike on the back. Axes are particularly popular in battle. What makes them special, however, is their power when striking. The force that can be transferred to the point of the blade axe is usually higher than with many maces, especially as they can be wielded with both hands, what is not common in medieval for maces. As far as I know, war axes are rarely found in historical duels, but on the battlefield they have a more common use. In the 5th place is the absolute close combat weapon, the dagger. Duels in armor often ends in close combat and grappling. As long as you get into close combat, the roundel dagger is the absolute king. The weapon is incredibly fast and precise. While longer weapons can get stuck in close combat, a dagger is short enough to be continued past the opponent's defense, arms to the target, and the blade is an average of 30 centimeter, is still long enough to step into the opponent's heart between the gaps. Wielded with one hand, the roundel dagger is hardly able to pierce through the opponent's mail in combat. But the round guards not only protects the hands perfect, but also serves a pressure point for the second hand to ram the dagger into the opponent's gaps. The problem with the dagger using as the only weapon, however, is getting into close combat. A dagger is almost useless for defense, and there is still an enormous risk on blindly rushing at your opponent and hoping that your armor will protect you while you're looking for gaps in the opponent's armor, and only having your free arm to block the opponent from doing the same. Close combat with daggers often ends with two people seriously injured and barely surviving the duel. Relying on the opponent being incompetent is not a particularly good choice for a good weapon in a duel. The falchion is a combination of an axe and a sword. The little bit more heavy blade can cause devastating damage, and if you turn it, you can hit with the bigger surface so you don't damage the blade. Even if you don't want to use the blade against armor, the sharp blade protects the wearer of the weapon from being grabbed while wrestling. Otherwise, there is a high probability that cuts will injure the hand in grappling if the weapon carrier begins to tear the falchion. The half-swording technique is primarily intended for long swords, but can also be used with one-handed swords. Even with a sharp blade, you can switch into half-swording. With a falchion, even much easier, because you can grip the backside of the sword. The sword becomes now a heavy two-handed dagger. In contrast to the warhammer, the cross does not get in the way when stabbing, and the pommel as a counterweight makes stabbing faster and more flexible. At the same time, the one-handed sword can also be turned into the mortau, and the crossguard can be used as a spiked warhammer and the pommel as a mace. I put the poleaxe on the third place. The poleaxe is a weapon designed for armored combat. It combines the various advantages of the previous weapons into a powerful two-handed pole weapon. There are different forms of poleaxes. They also include the bec de falchion, or falcon's beak, or falkenschnabel, as a two-handed warhammer with a spearhead at the foot of the pole weapon. Every hit with these weapons had force and could be fatal, but it also applies to the poleaxes that a direct hit to the plate of the armor with the axe blade, hammer or falcon's beak does not kill. Even with these giant weapons, gaps in armor must be found. In particular, the use of both ends of the weapon ensembles versatile and unpredictable attacks, which also makes the weapon successful in duels. The ability to strike effectively, stab with different ends, blocking with a reinforced shaft, hooking with a spiked axe blade is what puts the poleaxe so high in my ranking. The longsword is for me the second place. With the size of 110 to 145 centimeter, it is optimized for half swording techniques. As long as you are not too close while wrestling, you're wielding a heavy two-handed dagger that can penetrate mail with the tip and pierce into gaps of armor. Historically, this weapon would have to be the #1 dueling weapon, as most knights choose to use long swords in duels. But this list is also my private list. The longsword is the perfect stabbing weapon, with the pommel as a counterweight, so that it can be used quickly and nimble. In mid-range, the sword is nimble enough for fast stabs to the visor and other armor gaps. And in close range, the half sword is the most dangerous weapon for a knight in full armor. A thin and pointy tip is able to slip between the plates and has the force of a full longsword in two hands. My personal #1 is the two-handed sword. For me, a well-balanced two-handed sword is the optimal weapon when fighting against armor. In duels, it's basically a bigger longsword with more impact without compromising the speed and nimble thrusts from half swording. It enjoys all the advantages and works also like a heavy two-handed dagger in half sword. The additional mass and length also give the two-handed sword power in the long handle. The extended crossguard creates a warhammer in mortar, and the additional spiked parrying hooks are also additional weapons in the repertoire of a two-handed sword. Most fully armored duels of the late Middle Ages and early modern times were often conducted with the same combination of weapons, to prove that one was better than the other opponent, in a duel of honor. It was not usually necessary to choose a single weapon. Many duels started with a lance, but you also had a sword and dagger at your side. The first two thrusts were made with the spear. If you miss, you switch to the sword, which is where most duels ended. But if you needed another weapon, you had a dagger at your side. Now that you know my opinion, I am even more curious as to which weapon or combination of weapon you would choose for a duel to the death. We see us in the comments. Bye bye.